How could this have existed 10 years before the first video game? Back in the 1950s, the English language was quite different. The word mouse referred only to a pesky little critter. To hack used to mean to cut or sever with repeated irregular or unskillful blows, and computer was an occupation, a person performing routine calculations aided by, at best, a mechanical calculator. Some people have heard of UNIVACs, universal automatic computers. Only multi-million-dollar companies could afford them, giant room-sized machines primarily used for accounting. An operator puts in a heap of punched cards in the evening, and in the morning, the UNIVAC adds up a few numbers, calculates a worker's salary, and prints it on the paycheck. It takes up the whole night, but it is automatic, and it beats having an accountant do this all manually. MIT had a few of these early computers, used for running elaborate physics simulations. Computer time was extremely expensive, and a mere undergrad would never be allowed into the machine room. Only the special caste of computer operators, colloquially named the priesthood, would be allowed to touch the machine. Even if you were studying programming, you had to relay your code to a priest through a hole in the wall and patiently wait for the results to come. If your code had bugs, you would maybe fix one bug a day. For some, this was incredibly frustrating. Peter Sampson aptly compared this to a form of medieval torture. He was part of the Signals and Power subcommittee from the Tech Model Railroad Club. By day, they were soldering complex automatic systems controlling the pathways of toy trains. By night, they were unauthorized users of the TIGZO. And of course, they were developing their own jargon. Equipment wasn't broken, it was munched. It wasn't garbage, it was cruft. It wasn't an impressive feat, it was a hack. And everybody wanted to be the best hacker. At the same time, Marvin Minsky and John McCarthy were starting their research in the newly created field of artificial intelligence. Professors quickly realized that hackers had a unique skill set, which would come in handy for teaching computers how to reason. This particular application also required a machine capable of real-time interaction. If you want to teach a computer how to talk, then, for starters, you need to be in the same room where the computer is, and you don't want its reply to take hours or days. In 1961, the Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, donated their brand new computer to MIT, a successor to the TIGZO. It was called the PDP-1, short for Programmed Data Processor. It became known as the first mini-computer. Compared to the IBM's hulking giants, which needed a dedicated building, the PDP-1 is tiny, just the size of a few refrigerators. Mainframes used an obscene amount of power, hundreds of kilowatts, which requires a 3-phase power supply, and you need to build an electrical substation to accommodate it, and you also need cooling systems, and so on and so on. Meanwhile, PDP-1 plugged into a wall. It was also much more affordable, with a retail price of $120,000 compared to over $2 million for a brand new IBM mainframe. But most important of all were the interactive capabilities of the PDP-1. The computer was equipped with a radar display and about a dozen switches, allowing real-time interaction with the computer program. Seeing the machine in action must have been captivating for hackers. With a debugger on, you could advance your program step by step, and the light bulbs would show you the exact state of the computer, which line of the code it is on, which memory address is it looking into, things like that. Before, only the priesthood had a privilege to see this glorious dance of light bulbs, but now the railroad enthusiasts can appreciate it too. Almost immediately upon hearing the news of the incoming PDP-1, Steve Russell, Martin Gratz, and Wayne Whitman have begun dreaming about their next hack. With the first astronauts having left the Earth just a few months before, space operas were on the rise. The hackers' minds immediately sprung into imagining science fiction heroes using a computer to control their spaceship. What if we could use the computer's display to simulate a space war? Easier said than done. The PDP-1 is less powerful than a Texas Instruments graphing calculator. PDP-1 has a total memory of 73 kilobits. TI-84 has 384. PDP-1 does 100,000 operations per second. TI-84 can manage a few million. In terms of software, PDP-1 had none, at least yet. The assembler, a program which allows you to write programs, was written by the hackers in the very first day. With it, you can tell a computer to add or subtract numbers, or to display a dot in a given position. If you want, say, to have a rotating rocket on a screen, you would have to figure out how to turn it around pixel by pixel. So when Steve Russell broke the news to his friends in the AI development group, everybody was excited. But unfortunately, Russell didn't know how to start coding because he didn't know how to get from the assembler to computing the cosine of an angle. Luckily, Alan Kotok had close connections to DEC. He made a trip to the company's office, and returned with a piece of yellow tape. "Here's a sine-cosine routine, now what's your excuse?" he said. Steve Russell was done with the basic version of the game in about 6 months. The hacker culture at MIT was extremely collaborative. Whenever they saw an impressive hack, everybody tried to improve upon it ever so slightly. Peter Sampson added a realistic star chart in the background. Dan Edwards programmed the gravity calculations to make the game more challenging. Martin Gratz invented the hyperspace button. There was no official or definitive version of Spacewar. That's why different sources describe the gameplay in different ways. Presently, the only work in PDP-1 in the world is on display in the Computer History Museum in Mountain View. People can play Spacewar on the original hardware as part of the PDP-1 demo lab. This graphic demo was actually created by Professor Marvin Minsky, who was very supportive of the hacker culture. Minsky has accidentally discovered a very short algorithm for drawing a circle while trying to create a spiral curve. He then observed that if you try to draw a circle of ever-increasing size, it creates captivating patterns when wrapping around the screen. The students have affectionately named this program the Minskytron. By flipping the switches, you can see slightly different Minskytrons. All of them start from a simple geometric pattern, which gradually diverge to a complete chaos. The charming afterglow of a moving image is dictated by the fact that PDP-1 uses a radar screen as a display. An electron gun would shoot a beam of electrons on a phosphorescent screen, and the small patch of it would become excited, emitting a white glow. It takes a few seconds for the phosphor to recover after excitation, and in the process the glow becomes a deep yellow. Finally, the audience gets a chance to play Spacewar. The demonstrator can use the switches on the control panel to turn various features of the game on and off. Originally, the first 4 and the last 4 switches of the test word were used as controls for the first and second player. However, hackers' elbows quickly got sore, and they have created the world's very first gamepad, which originally looked slightly differently from what we see at the museum. Spacewar is a 2-player game. One player controls the needle, the other controls the wedge. The rockets are engaged in a dogfight around the central star. The background of Spacewar is a masterpiece in and of itself. The program, called the Expansive Planetarium, displays a slowly moving star chart. Its author, Peter Sampson, used to say that if you see the background repeating itself, which takes a few hours, it's probably a good idea to stop playing. The controls are quite realistic. Instead of having the buttons for up, down, left, and right, it has the buttons for turn left, turn right, and thrust. Rockets in Spacewar have inertia. That means that after you've built up some speed, you need an equal amount of time to slow down. In addition to that, the central star exerts a strong gravity pull on you. If you collide with a star, you teleport to the outermost point of the screen. Because the space warps around like in Pac-Man, left edge connects to the right edge, top to the bottom, this leads to a jumbled appearance of your ship. Most people haven't piloted a spaceship in real life. For us Earthlings, the ways to deal with the gravitational pull of a star are quite unintuitive. Here's one of the tricks that experienced Spacewar players used. You take inspiration from a comet, move it a little bit sideways and enter in a stable orbit. While the star swings you around, you have the time to aim your shot. It was called the CBS opening because the first afterglow produces a shape similar to the CBS logo. You attack by firing photon torpedoes at your opponent, with a torpedo tube taking a few seconds to reload. Your shots ignore the gravity of a central star, but they do obey the laws of inertia. This means a torpedo fired upward while you're flying to the right will follow a diagonal path. You can also shoot down your opponent's projectiles as a defensive tactic. The range of a photon torpedo is about half a screen, and it dissipates without a trace afterwards. You have 31 projectiles in total, but the amount of remaining ammo is not displayed anywhere on the screen. In case both players run out of their supplies, the game ends in a draw. On a similar note, it's also possible to run out of fuel. The latter possibility does not automatically end the game. Finally, your rocket is equipped with a Mark I hyperfield generator, an unreliable feature which allows you to traverse the hyperspace. By pressing a hyperspace button, your rocket disappears from the screen and reappears a few seconds later at a random position. Or sometimes the hyperfield generators just explode in your face. It takes up a lot of energy to pry the fourth dimension open, so you can use the hyperspace feature with a cooldown of roughly 5 seconds or so. The hyperfield generator theoretically has 8 charges, but you'd be lucky to survive 3 hyperspace jumps without malfunction. Remember that I said there is no definitive version of Spacewar? The game is insanely hackable, and whenever people got bored, there were always things to change. Even the basic version of Spacewar has different game modes, which are activated by the sense switches on the control panel. Sense Switch 2 makes gravity weaker, which makes it a good practice mode for learning the game. Sense Switch 6 turns it off entirely, together with the display of the central star. Sense Switch 4 turns off the expensive planetarium. These features were useful in development as a debugging tool, and they're also useful for the PDP-1 demo lab, where the demonstrator starts with a bare-bones version of the game, and then flips Switch 4 when discussing the stars, and Switch 6 when discussing the gravity. Sense Switch 3 is intended to turn off the possibility to hold the fire button to shoot torpedoes continuously, forcing you to mesh fire every few seconds, but the feature doesn't work. Sense Switch 5 changes the behavior of the star. If it is on, you will die upon collision instead of teleporting to the corner. Sense Switch 1 has the most interesting behavior, activating a more realistic mode of rotation. If the switch is on, the left and right buttons do not turn you left or right, but instead they increase or decrease your angular momentum. This means that if I hold left for 2 seconds and release it, the rocket will be spinning at a constant rate, and I need to hold right for 2 seconds to stop the rotation. If it is that hard to explain, imagine how hard it is to actually play. If you don't take your time to stop your rotation, you would travel in spirals, which are very difficult to get used to. And when this wasn't enough, people would sometimes make a hack of Spacewar by changing one of the fundamental constants. Here is an example of such a hack called Winds of Space. Needless to say, this mode is extremely challenging. Here is another example played on 2 separate screens, with every player having something like a first-person perspective. I really like the psychological horror of incoming doom when you smash into the star. An interesting byproduct of the first-person perspective is that during the hyperspace jump, you know where your ship will appear somewhat beforehand. As you can see, the game is insanely complex for the era. If you compare it to similar games from the late 70s, 15 years into the future, Spacewar would have given them a run for their money. Of course, you have to keep in mind that hackers from MIT were one of the most talented programmers of their era. They really knew the PDP-1 and they squeezed everything from the machine to create the ultimate gaming experience. And most importantly, Spacewar is fun. The controls are fun to master and they feel quite complex. The game gives you a lot of situations which you have to resolve in a split second. Oh no, this torpedo is going to hit me. Do I accelerate and get past it? Do I turn around and try to maneuver? Do I risk going into hyperspace? In a sense, every action game traces its roots back to Spacewar. You have to face a similar dilemma in Pac-Man. Do I outrun the ghost or do I turn around? Do I risk to rush to a power pellet and get a high reward? What about Super Mario Bros.? Oh no, a spiny is falling on me. Do I accelerate and get past it or do I turn around? Do I risk trying to kill a Lakitu? And Spacewar nails it just as good as classical games do, despite predating them by over 20 years. Seriously, just go and play Spacewar using the link in the description, it's great. With all I've said so far, you would naturally expect that Spacewar would have spread like wildfire. Hackers believed that software should be freely distributed, so that anybody could improve upon it. DEC would use the game to impress the potential buyers of the PDP-1, and soon Spacewar would be everywhere the machine would go. But given the price tag of 120 grand, that is insane much. Even with Spacewar as a promising marketing tool, DEC ended up selling only 53 copies of the machine. As time went on, newer computers arrived, cheaper and more powerful. This meant not only more scientific progress, but also more time for Spacewar. On a PDP-6 at Stanford AI Lab, the researchers have implemented a Spacewar mode. The computer would allocate the minimal amount of resources necessary to run the game, and the rest of the compute would go to more productive purposes. Eventually, Spacewar would impress Nolan Bushnell and kickstart the video game industry, but that would be a story of another decade. Next time, we'd be looking at the Sumerian game from 1964, which did for the strategy genre what Spacewar did for action. In the meantime, the Caribbean crisis did not lead to the destruction of mankind, Martin Luther King Jr. has delivered his famous speech, and John Kennedy has been assassinated. Indeed, there wasn't much time for video games at the moment. I've been Steve Nesterov, signing off.